Right, so today we're doing The Omega Man from 1971, starring Charlton Heston. One of the things I love about this film is right from the opening shot, so fun. Like the feel of it is fun. You have Charlton Heston going through these abandoned streets in these creepy shots where it keeps zooming out further and further, and you see all the streets are abandoned, no one else around, but it doesn't have that same sort of post-apocalyptic feel. It is fun. Like he's driving around in muscle cars, gun toting, shooting up mutants, listening to music wherever he wants, going into different department shops and just taking whatever he wants. He bowls up to a cinema and he's putting on whatever movie he wants. He's got the whole place to himself. He's watching old stuff from Woodstock. It's just fun. Like the only other film I can think of in terms of like a post-apocalyptic film that without feeling silly, like in the sense that it's still supposed to be taken seriously, but it just looks like fucking fun. It makes the apocalypse look like fun, is Dawn of the Dead, the original, of course. Mainly in the sequence where the two SWAT team guys are just sort of going around clearing out the mall. You know, that whole sequence, the whole vibe of it is fun. Like the characters are having fun. And even though Clint Eastwood is basically losing his marbles, hallucinating, phones ringing.
There is no phone ringing, damn it!
I think it's in certain ways living out every boy's dream, the world he's living. Like maybe not, obviously not the being alone aspect of it, but the freedom of it. Like he's just going around, money is no object, all the goods of the world are there for him to pluck like apples from a tree. His home that he goes back to is like the ultimate bachelor pad. You know, he's got statues and toys and machines and just everything is piled in there. He's a scientist, so he's doing all that. He's got his laboratory in the back. He's got his sort of pad where he hangs out, and it's like a mansion, but it's also like a fortress. And it looks fun. And I think partly that's the tone of the film as well. The tone of the film is kind of goofy and cheesy in early 70s. I guess maybe it's the fact that I'm an introvert by nature. I would probably hack that version of the apocalypse a lot better than most people, and it looks more fun to me than it probably would look to most people.
It will get pretty boring after a while. I guess that's the reason why he's playing chess against a statue. But other than that, yeah, it looks pretty funny. He's driving about. If he gets bored of his car, he just goes and grabs another one. He seemingly just shoot assault rifles if he's bored. Do you know what I mean? But what else is there to do? Like, in this bachelor pad, he's seemingly got like some famous artworks from wherever he's nicked that from, like from famous artists, Picasso, he looks like, and stuff like that.
He's basically living out Grand Theft Auto, but all the NPCs have disappeared. Charlton Heston is a gangster.
Yeah.
And it's funny seeing him, like, because knowing, like, he was a pretty conservative dude in real life.
Oh.
You know, head of the NRA or whatever he was. Ambassador for it, anyway. And it's funny seeing him in this because, you know, this is an interestingly progressive movie as well. His female love lead is African-American. The soundtrack is all jazzified. And even the creatures that we come onto. Like, so much of this film is of its time, of the 70s. A lot of time people say that like it's a bad thing, but when it's early 70s... that's like exactly what I want. Like I want it to be of its time. I want, you know, the soundtrack is so of its time, the dialogue so of its time. I feel like you can see that also in the creatures. Like they're interesting creatures because they're not bloodthirsty monsters. As much as this has parallels and obviously influences on later zombie films and the zombie genre and virus genres and all post-apocalyptic films in some ways, they're not just really humanoid. They're really intelligent. They're really lucid. Clearly have like a lot of influence from the Manson murders were only a year or two before, and they literally refer to themselves as the family, which is what the Manson cult used to call themselves. So there's a lot of influences there where you can clearly see they're modelled on it.
Alone, outnumbered hundreds to one, nothing to live for but his memories, nothing to live with but his gadgets, his cars, his guns.
The way they speak to each other, they sound like they fell out of a Shakespeare play. At times, like really kind of romantic use of language and philosophical, and you know the main bad dude, albino mutant guy, sounds a bit like nearly a preacher at times, mixed with a bit of political activist, revolutionary type character from the times. You know, they kind of have that vibe. You know, there's a bit of the Black Panthers.
Put the power to him, brother. Just a little nitro. I can get the cannons out of the old God armory. We can have him out of there in no time.
I said no.
Yeah,
coming through.
No, they do.
So you see all these interesting influences. The soundtrack clearly has all those influences from the time. You know, it's a bit psychedelic at points. It's a bit jazz at other times. And then you have Charlton Heston going around with a scoped up automatic rifle, blapping them all from his window. It's such a wacky film.
I think it's the first time we see the albino cult. We don't really know what their agenda is, but he just starts mowing them down. You're like, oh, this guy is a mad one. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because that's the other thing. As intelligent as they are, they're pretty incompetent. There's not a lot of planning. They kind of just turn up and stand around a lot of the time, or just wait to be shot at. You know, they can have these really in-depth discussions and debates between each other, but it hasn't occurred to them to pick up guns or anything.
Yeah.
To be fair, there's an inbuilt belief that they have that kind of defends that point, in that they seem to be rejecting technology and form their own religion.
By machines, not by the evil, forbidden things. The tools that destroy the world.
A few problems with that, because they're quite inconsistent with the folklore rules. They seem to have, you know, the mutants seem to have just come out of the wake of the apocalypse, which was caused by warfare, and then there was a bacterial or viral outbreak of some kind, and it wiped out the human race, but some of them survived and some of them seemingly just mutated. But then the survivors that we encounter in the film later are already infected and slowly turning, but not really sure why they're slowly turning, why they haven't turned yet. And some people seem to change really suddenly.
Yeah.
But then also, we'll get into that later, but they seem to still retain their human memories in a lot of way, even though others don't at all. So there's a lot of inconsistencies. But if you just kind of like accept that, the rest of the film is so much fun. You know, with zombies nowadays, obviously every new zombie film that comes out has its own twist, you know, whatever it is. But the rules of zombies generally are pretty much set. And it's refreshing seeing this film because it didn't have all those rules set in place. The zombie genre that would come to dominate this sort of subset of horror hadn't even existed yet, hadn't even come to be yet. So all was in its very early stages with the Night of the Living Dead film that would have come out a few years prior. It's just beautiful to see it. There's been 3 adaptations of this. This was the middle one. It's by far the least faithful, but definitely my favourite of the 3. But it's funny because the original is so influential in so many ways. Like, it is the birth of the zombie genre, even though obviously George A. Romero would create it a few years after the book was released. But really, this was the original in so many ways, even though it was vampires. I have no problem when books are adapted into films. If they just completely change it for the sake of it, it pisses me off. If they take the title but it's really dissimilar, or they throw out characters for no reason, obviously you're livid. But, you know, like Lord of the Rings, if you actually read the books to the film, most people would say that's a great adaptation. But there's loads of things changed, loads of things removed, characters,
Tom Bombadil.
you know, multiple characters combined into one to simplify the storytelling and make the cast smaller. There's an art to adapting, and a lot of what that art is things to remove and things to change. But when you read I Am Legend, the original novel, it's really short, it's really concise, and it's confined to a few locations. It's got a pretty minimal cast, and it reads like a treatment for a script.
Okay.
You don't have to change a thing, and it would be perfect. The big difference in the novel and where the title comes from is that when they capture him in the end, they are getting ready to execute him, and they have him locked up in this tower, and he's overlooking them, and he kind of realizes they're not just looking at him like, haha, we got you. They're looking at him like, oh, holy shit, like that's him. He's peeking out the window. They're just going about their business. And he realizes it's their world now. We had our chance. Out of the ashes of the apocalypse, they come out of it. And I'm a leftover monster from a time before that. I am the monster. I am the vampire. I'm the boogeyman. I am legend. And that's the last line of the book. You see where they've tried to kept elements of it in this film. But it's kind of like one thing you notice with adaptions, and when a script's gone through too many rewrites or different writers, is that there's weird elements that stick out, and they're artifacts from a story that it no longer is. It's a remake of a film that came out only 6 years prior and an adaptation of a novel, but they've taken their own spin on it and then incorporated a lot of themes and stylings of the time, of the early 70s. So there's no concise vision in that sense. There's a concise vision from the director and how the movie eventually plays out and the aesthetic and the tone. But in terms of themes and messages, I wouldn't get too bogged down in that. I wouldn't think like, oh, what are they trying to say? What it's really about? I would more just enjoy what it's invoking. You know, when you see him going around as the last man on Earth, as far as he's aware at this point, you're just thinking like, holy fuck, what would that be like? And then he's getting tormented at night by these mutants that come out every single night to torment him. Which, by the way, that place didn't look that much of a fortress. The fact that one of them eventually just decides to crawl up the side and go through a window, and you think,
I know.
You think they've been tormenting him every night for 2 years, and it's only just occurred to him to do that.
Yeah, again, that is, I guess you've picked an inconsistency there. Like sometimes it was confusing. It's like, why are they changing, or why is he not? Do you know what I mean? But then you've got to see it as a fun film instead of a thought-provoking film. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you look at it in the grand scheme of things, it's like the director to Charlton Heston. You're the last man on Earth. You run around with machine guns. You have all these gadgets. There's like these little zombie vampire albino things that you shoot up and grab up and set on fire, if you like. And you're also a scientist, and you're also a very nice ladies' man who shags, coincidentally, the only woman also left on Earth.
Oh yeah.
And then I bet he's like, sign me up. Do you know what I mean?
A lot of people then don't like this middle part from when we first are introduced to the female lead.
Hey! Come back! Wait! Come back!
I've got to agree, man. I just found her a bit annoying.
Oh, you found her annoying?
Yeah, I don't ask me why. I just found her annoying.
Really?
I'm sorry to say that.
I see. She's one of my favourite bits. Like that's for me. That's one of those things where once the movie introduces her, where it's like Charlton Heston's getting with a foxy 70s black chick. Like, this is it's just something I'd never expect to see in film.
Beyonce and Austin Powers, Gold member. And it's just one of those things. I don't know why I don't like her. It's just like, you know, when like everyone likes a person, and everyone's like, well, I don't like that guy. He's blah, blah, blah. And you're just like, I just don't like him.
Is it the fact that the film changes pace and direction at that point as well? So do you think it might be the fact that the moment she arrives, you don't like the film as much as well?
I guess, yeah, that would be a good summarisation of it, because I was thoroughly enjoying just him goofing about, just like zooming about in cars and like messing about. And when they come along, the whole dynamic's changed, because he isn't the last person.
It's okay, Tommy. This is the man, and I mean the man. But he's cool. It's okay.
I love every section of the film. A lot of people say the pace is quite slow at points, but I never really found that. You know, the fact that he is alone for so much of the film, you know, he needs to talk to himself, and that works because you would talk to yourself, but you can only talk to yourself so much because you'd never talk back, and it starts getting goofy. So there's long sections where there's no dialogue, and that's where sound design or a good soundtrack becomes really important. And I fucking loved the soundtrack. Like, that's one thing I remembered from being a kid, was how awesome the soundtrack is in this. But I didn't remember it being quite... I remembered it just that main jazzy sort of theme tune. I don't remember it being quite as eclectic as it was.
Yeah.
You know, it has a lot of different, you know, a lot of different styles, a lot of different genres, a lot of different like instrumental setup. Some of it's electric, some of it's orchestral. The soundtrack is brilliant, and there's a lot of different individual pieces. Like, the one I remember especially the most was when he first gets attacked as he's going back to his house the first night, and it kicks in and he's like shooting at mutants and flipping them over, and they're dropping fire bombs onto his car. it's like booming in the background, and it was just like, it's just pure popcorn, goofy, cheesy fun. But also the violence is pretty cool. Like, there was some clumsy fight sequences in films back then. And although it's mildly goofy, there's, you know, it's quite modern and contemporary in a lot of the ways, the way it's shown. I'm always amazed when there's a flashback in movies from this era that is a quick cut without it, you know, being like a waving over their face as it slowly goes back, because moviegoers were so unacquainted with cinema language back then that they would be shocked and confused if it was suddenly back in time and wouldn't be able to follow the narrative. Whereas in this, like, you know, it cuts back to him proper having a realistic fight that would be perfectly acceptable in a modern film with one of the mutants.
Once I caught one of Matthias's people last year and tried everything in the shelves on him.
When he's just at his balcony and sees all the mutants hanging out there one night, he just pulls up his gun and you're looking through the scope and he just starts blapping at him. So it's quite like there was something modern feeling about the way the violence was portrayed, but the effects were very much of the time and quite, like, you know, dated now, which, you know, the whole film is. Well, speaking of the flashbacks, what did you think of the longer form flashbacks that were dotted throughout the film to give you an insight into the apocalypse that happened and the fact that Charlton Heston's character was a scientist that was working on the immunity vaccination, was involved in a helicopter crash? Because these were some of my favourite sequences.
The helicopter crash was a joke.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. And I love, like, he crashes in a helicopter and has the vaccine ready to inject into.
The helicopter crash was just so jokes. It starts off in a close-up shot in the cockpit, and then then it like spins around for about 2 minutes. And like,
I know.
I was like, what's going on? And then it explodes, and he like seemingly just walks out of it like Bionic Man.
It was like the classic A-Team car crashes and airplane crashes where no one ever died in the A-Team, even if a helicopter crashed into the side of a mountain, everyone just sort of dusted themselves off and walked off.
It's like the latest James Bond film. It's like, yeah, he's been blown up, like it's right landed next to him, but this is James Bond, so it's James Bond, so he's gonna be alright. You know what I mean? I guess they served their purpose because they told the history behind it. They framed him as the scientist. I think they've done a pretty good job, actually.
I loved him. Like, even forgetting like how well it contributed to giving the backstory, I just really enjoyed him because you know, there's something enjoyable about when there's, you know, this film is very much in a certain time zone and era. You know, it's in you know, post-apocalypse. There's mutants running about, and having these little segments that were back in the world before it all happened.
The very foundations of civilization are beginning to crumble under the dread assault of that horror long feared germ warfare.
And you know, there's one moment where it's panning through a motorway where, you know, obviously everyone was trying to leave the cities and they were in a massive traffic jam and everyone's died, but their radios are still playing the warning signals from the government saying don't leave your houses, blah blah blah. And you know, it really gave a sense of the scope of it, because this is supposed to be a global apocalypse, but obviously it's confined to one person's story. So I love these bits to give that scope of just what happened, and you only get a couple of kernels of information here and there. You hear about, you know, Russia and China are at war and there's a nuclear war and then this virus comes about. You find out as much as you need to know. Doesn't really matter. Like, it's kind of like a good trailer for a film where it gives you just enough details where you fill all the blanks in with your own imagination.
Are we assuming here that every single other person in this little section of the world is dead? So
I think it's 99.9% of people are dead. Of that amount that is left over from that number, 99% of them have turned into mutants.
Okay.
And then like 1% of that number are just survivors. That's what I think, anyway.
All right, yeah, makes
Ultimately,
sense.
if it doesn't explain it, it's whatever you want or whatever you can theorise. So it does kind of go off the rails, but for me, that's, again, what I enjoy about it. And a lot of people complain about the pacing, but for me, the pace goes quick. Like, you know, you only have 10 or 20 minutes to enjoy him knocking about by himself, actually being the last man on Earth, before he's not the last man on Earth. Then he's meeting up with these weird hippie commune up in the hills. And there's that little dorky chick who's like, "Are you God?" Looking up at him with
Yeah,
those
yeah.
doe eyes. And then you're doing that for like half an hour, and then you're back in the city, and he's trying to make this vaccine to save the chick he's shagging's little brother. You know, there's a couple of fights and skirmishes and scenes with the mutants where they're plotting stuff or having loud conversations or, you know, doing attacks that never seem to go well. They never get... You can see why they revere him as like this terrifying monster, because they fucking get their ass kicked every time they meet up with him. Anytime they clash with him, the big bad guy, Albino, even says to him at one point once they capture him, "You're looking at us like we're the bad guys. How many of us have you killed today? How many of us did you kill yesterday?"
Yeah.
You know.
Last night you killed how many? 3 of us? And today we don't know yet. You're the angel of death, Doctor.
It's kind of like that Austin Powers sketch where he like runs over a henchman, and it's like no one ever like considers the henchman who just work there. There's always the good
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah, no one ever thinks of his family, a little kid at home.
Does it ever answer the question about what they're doing for like supplies and shit?
No. Doesn't even try to.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone's just looting, aren't they? Even the mutants themselves are looting. Like, essentially, it's one of those things where if it wasn't for their skin and their creepy robes and their weird Shakespearean style of speaking to each other, there's very little difference between the mutants and the surviving humans.
Yeah, but it's just easy, Declan, because in a way, they don't actually pose any threat. It's like, I just do everything that I need to do during the daytime in the sun, which they can't go out in because they're albino and sensitive to light. When it comes to night, I will just lock my mansion, which is seemingly shit actually, and they know he's there. I just be like, right, they know I'm here, so I probably should change buildings for a bit so they don't know where I am.
Well, he says himself at one point, you know, "It's my home, I'm not going to be driven out."
Alright, like, fair enough, but like...
But I do know what you mean. There is an element of like, can't you just be like, "Hey man, like, big city, there's not many people left, like, you have the night, we'll have the day, we'll just chill and like be cool with each other."
But is their mission to convert him to one of them?
No, they want to exterminate him.
They want to kill him.
To be fair, they're kind of right. If you look at it from their point of view, they are the things that have risen from the ashes. It's their world now. They're the last remnants of the evil race, as far as they're concerned.
That started it.
Well, that wiped out all life on Earth nearly. They fucked everything up. So it's the same thing with the Planet of the Apes, also starring Charlton Heston, where we blew it up, those maniacs. That is, that's what he says at the end when he finds the old Statue of Liberty hanging out on the beach. It's us who fucked it up. Why are they the bad guys? Just because it's from our own perspective. But from their perspective, he's the villain. He's the monster. He's the freak who, like, what, he can come out during the day. And he's got, like, normal skin and, like, he's the freak. He's the monster. He's Blade.
He's like Blade Daywalker.
So we have the whole sequence where he's been kidnapped and then he's saved by the commune.
Yeah.
And they bring him back and they start working on the virus. So he brings the female lead's little brother back to his bachelor pad in the city because that's where his lab is. And they're figuring everything out and he managed to save him and it's working. And he knows, like, from his blood, his blood, he can create a serum that will be a cure and bring him back. They don't think they can bring back the people that are already mutants, but people that are in the process of transforming, apparently as a cure. And then once he's cured, he's got the immunity so they can make more from his blood. So that's the big plan. But then we have a few sequences where, the little brother's gotten better and he's up and about and he's starting to have conversations with Charlton Heston. And he's got this thing of, I guess he's young and he's got this, "Hey man, can't we all get along" perspective. We should go tell him. We should go tell the mutant boys that, we might have a treatment for him. We might be able to bring him back to how things were. And Charlton Heston's just like, "Fuck that. Like, you're going to get yourself killed. They're not going to want it. Even if it works, they're not going to want it. We're better off just killing all of them." And again, there's a couple of lines of dialogue from the kid where, I feel like it's a leftover artifact from when it was maybe more faithful to the novel. Because he says, it's just certain lines that just don't really make sense to the conversation they're having. He's sort of going like, "Man, sometimes you scare me more than the mutants."
Yeah.
At times you scare me more than Matthias does.
But he says it after he's said to Charlton Heston, why don't you just go kill them all? And Charlton Heston's like, nah.
You've been looking to kill him for practically 2 whole years now. Either kill him or cure him, damn it.
And then Charlton
Let's just go escape.
Then Charlton Heston like just slaps his arm and goes, ha ha ha.
Go eat your soup.
Yeah, then walks off.
But he says, no, I don't want to kill them all. And then the guy's like, man, sometimes you scare me more than the mutants.
Well,
So
no,
I was a bit like, what the fuck are you talking about?
The kid says that he's been trying to find like where they live for like 3 years, their nest, and the kid knows where it is, isn't it? It's in like the community centre or whatever, or wherever it is.
When you need something to happen in a story, it's like easy to write a character, usually a kid, who does something stupid. Because it just, it can just be a catalyst to make something happen. Problem is, it's an annoying trope. It's annoying kind of like get out clause. And also, it just makes you hate that character.
Yeah.
Like, I hated that kid. I hated his goofy teeth. I hated his fucking
Yeah,
dumb
teeth.
questions. And the fact that he's like, oh yeah, let me just turn up to the big evil mutant layer and just be like, hey man, we can cure all of you, blah, blah, blah. Like, why the fuck would you do that? Why would you have the balls to do
He
that?
He could have easily just gone to Charles Heston's mansion, the Omega Man's mansion, who they know full well gather there every single night with that stupid wooden thing to try and catch him, and just bin from the balcony. Hi guys, I possibly could cure you all. Would you like that or not? And then if they say no, just retreat back into the mansion.
That's such a good point. Like, why didn't he just wait for them to all turn up again?
Yeah.
Like they do every night, apparently.
But he decided to go down there. Look.
Yeah, the movie needed it.
Yeah.
So he goes down there. The King Mutant's just like, shut the fuck up straight
Yeah,
away.
yeah.
He's like,
Basically.
fucking nail this cunt to a wall.
And that's what Neville thinks we want. Is that why he sent you?
He didn't send me.
Silence!
So they do that and they head out there. And Charlton Heston, he makes his way to the lair somehow and finds him dead. And he's like, oh shit. And he heads back to his bachelor pad and all the mutants have broken in. And this is what cracked me up is, it has that feel of a zombie apocalypse movie at so many points, but then you just forget, like, these guys really just act like dudes. Like, even when they smash up his lab, they're doing it with, like, baseball bats and stuff. They're just like a gang. They are, like, more like a cult than anything. And this one bit I loved. I love the speech from King Mutant. He's assembled all these artifacts, essentially. All these, these beautiful paintings, and I think there's a pinball machine in the corner, and all these beautiful things and statues and jewelry and material goods and beautiful cars, and he's collected all these beautiful leftover things that humans had created, both old and new, and they just smash the shit out of it with baseball bats. They're knocking the laboratory over and smashing all the beakers and all the nerdy laboratory shit, whatever you use it for, smash up everything. And he says, it's all gone now. All your bullshit, all your things you were trying to cling on to, it's gone. And now it's our time.
He was the last of those who brought the punishment to us. We have cleansed and purged his world. Now we must build.
I do love, as goofy as they are, the performances. They're hammed up and they're theatrical, but they're great performances by the mutants. All of them, especially the main guy. And this is the icing on the cake. It's just brilliant, like the way he delivers that whole speech.
I saw him as like smashing that up as like a fuck you to like the rich, and like your material possessions will mean nothing at the end of the world. You can't be the greatest, richest man in the graveyard. Let's change our ways. But again, probably overthinking. But
I don't think you're overthinking it. I think you're looking at through 2023 now lenses where, I mean, it's very much in vogue now where, like, one of the main background themes that seems to pop up in nearly every TV show and film at the minute is, the super rich and elitist and privileged versus the poor and not privileged. I don't think that it would have been specifically about the rich. I think it's more about, as we see in the opening scenes, like my child like mine just sees that, oh, he has all this stuff. That's cool. But in reality, he's watching the Woodstock footage from the movie in the cinema that he has all to himself. I see that like, wow, that'd be fun. But he's all by himself in this big empty cinema room, showing how alone he is. And he's watching this hippie talk about how human connection and that's all we need. And realistically, it's if you're gonna get metaphorical about it, that's probably when he's released. You know, he's released from having all that stuff, and he can do what really matters, even if he doesn't get to go on and be with those human and those survivors. He knows that's what matters to him so much more than all this stuff. You know, the fact that they destroy all these paintings and all this stuff he has up in his bachelor pad, it doesn't mean anything. What he cares about is the fact that, you know, his chick is turning into a mutant and she's in danger, and he's still trying to save her, and he runs outside and he kills one of the mutants. He runs outside, he sees her below. King Mutant's hanging off the balcony, sort of like giving it the "what's up, fucking, what you gonna do about it" gesture. He's trying to save her. He ends up getting a fucking javelin thrown at him. His gun starts jamming, so he can't shoot a mutant. And there's just randomly a big fucking spear hanging out on the balcony. So he throws it, and it hits Charlton Heston.
The cool, foxy chick.
Yeah.
I thought for a second that she wanted to like then join them. Yeah.
It hints like there's nearly a telepathic link between them, and she's drawn to him, but she still has some of her human sort of vibe to her, and she's, you know, she clearly, it's more like she's a junkie. She wants to go clean, and she wants to go with Charlton Heston, but she can't help being drawn to him, and she's stuck between the two worlds. But then when she sees Charlton Heston hurt, she's upset, and she wants to go to him, and she's kind of like between a rock and a hard place. The rest of the hippie commune survivors show up in the morning, and they find Charlton Heston pretty much dead. And the last thing he does is give him the vial. But I do like the fact that when they destroyed all his stuff, he was wiping out all the remains and great things that he meant to be human. Yeah. But it didn't matter, because all he gave a shit about was, you know,
Foxy.
This woman that he had a relationship with, and the people that he could help even though he was going to die. And he makes the ultimate sacrifice, and it kind of paints him in this almost, you know, Jesus dying on the cross for our sins kind of vibe to the ending. And then the lads drive off with his vial of blood, which I guess will, I don't know, they'll give a drop to every last survivor on the planet, and everyone will be great. And everyone will survive and not turn into an albino. Like, I love this film. I'm not that bothered about I Am Legend. It's got some really strong elements to that film, but it's also got some glaring flaws, and it's, you know, I can watch the first 30 minutes happily and really enjoy it, but big problems with that film. The original is just, you know, hammy and got some great moments, but pretty forgettable. This one is the least true to the original novel, which should piss me off the most, but I just love it. Like, it is mental, you know, it is just a crazy 70s trip of a movie. I love wacky 70s movies. I love weird movies in general. You know, it's quite unique in a lot of ways amongst the rest of the films in its genre or films of its time. And it's fairly somewhat forgotten now. Hopefully we'll reintroduce it to at least a handful of people that would never heard of it or never seen it. And they'll check it out and they'll like it. Because I think this is a brilliant, brilliant example of the post-apocalyptic genre.
This triumphs over I Am Legend. Number one, due to
shits on it, really.
Yeah, shits on it. Due to the fact of the leading role is Mr. Charlton Heston himself. Sorry, Will Smith, keep your name out of my mouth. And secondly, I do like the fact that they featured an interracial relationship.
Yeah, it's quite a progressive film in a lot of ways, and it's cool seeing that. You know, nowadays it's the studio heads will be probably saying, "Oh, can we get some more diversity in here?" I heard that's like trendy nowadays. But back then, it was actually a risk, especially on a big budget film, to do things like that. So yeah, fair play to them.
Which no doubt at the time, if you look back at articles or reviews, it would have caused a lot of controversy. But
you're right the first time.
Yeah, sorry. I just think that was a brave move. Like looking back to it now.
One thing as well, just one last thing I want to say before we wrap up is, well, as I was watching it, I couldn't help thinking, fuck, this would make a great free roam video game.
Yeah.
How fun would that be?
Yeah,
and have that exact aesthetic, your Charlton Heston, and it has the exact same soundtrack, maybe jazzed up a little, from sort of, you know, remixed a bit and redone a bit, but exact same sort of soundtrack, same aesthetic, and you're just going around looting, you know, finding a cool place to live, bringing back all the things you want there, hanging out, trying to find the odd survivor here and there or the odd dog knocking about and blapping up mutants, and you're free to do whatever you want during the day, and then it goes mental at night.
integrate like a design element, so you design your own pad.
That's what I mean.
Yeah,
exactly.
like put a paint in there. Yeah, that would work.
Yeah. Yeah, so for me, that is an easy recommendation for the Omega Man. I absolutely love it.